everyone. Welcome back to the Bearded Apologist. Today we're taking a look at the question, who created God? Now, why does this question matter? As Christians, we believe that God created the universe. We believe there are logical and scientific arguments to be made in support of that. But an atheist might counter and say, well, if the universe had a beginning, if the universe had a creator, who created God? Doesn't God also need a creator? And so we'll take a look at that question with a couple of clips today. The first one is by Pastor Knechtle. He's talking with a student on a college campus who asked him this question, who created God? Let's take a look.
So something you said about like life not coming from non-life.
Yes.
So why is it, we could use the argument that this universe, it doesn't make sense for it to come out of nothing.
Right.
So, and there has to be something that created the universe, right? So why do we take that, why is that same logic not applicable to God? Like why could we say, well, why is God there? Like what created
Good
that?
question. Who created God? Cliff, if you say that someone had to create the universe, why doesn't it follow that someone created God? I'll tell you why. The Big Bang blew Einstein out of the water because Einstein was convinced the universe is eternal. He was a pantheist. He thought the universe is God, nature is God. But then when George Lemaitre, a Belgian Catholic priest, begins to discover the Big Bang. Einstein is fascinated. But then Einstein begins to think about what are the consequences of the Big Bang. The consequences are nature is not eternal, there must be a creator, because it means the universe has a beginning if the Big Bang is true. It's not eternal. And Einstein was so opposed to that idea of there being a creator that mathematically he tried to disprove the Big Bang, and he put together a fudge factor to disprove the Big Bang. But some fellow mathematicians showed his dishonesty. And I respect Einstein because he said, you're right. I put that fudge factor in to try and disprove the Big Bang. Because he understood philosophically that if the universe does have a beginning, there's got to be a creator. So after he acknowledges that the Big Bang is accurate, he becomes a theist. He begins to believe that there's a God. So here's the point. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore the universe has a cause. I didn't say everything has a cause, right? Because the claim of the Bible is God is eternal. God does not have a beginning, which means God does not have a cause. So to ask the question, who created God, is to worship an idol of God, which is God is temporary, right? But you see what Jesus Christ in the Bible insists is, no, God doesn't have a beginning. God is not temporal. He's eternal. Does that make any sense?
Now, what you heard in that video that Cliff was talking about was something called the cosmological argument. It's sometimes called the Kalam cosmological argument for God. And it goes like this. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Now, what atheists often get wrong about this argument is they say that our argument, our belief is that everything has a cause. But that's not what we believe. We only believe that everything that begins to exist has a cause. So if something never began to exist, if it's eternal, then by definition it doesn't have a cause. It doesn't need a cause. And this isn't special pleading for God, by the way. If the atheist could somehow show that the universe itself was eternal, was uncaused, then there would be no need to invoke a God, a creator God, to account for it. Now, in this second clip by Dr. William Lane Craig, he explains a little bit of the philosophical side of the cosmological argument. Now, pay attention to what Dr. Craig says about the notion of an actual infinite. And after the video, we'll explain how that's relevant to the question of who created God. Let's take a look.
The origin of the universe. Have you ever asked yourself where the universe came from? Was there a beginning to the universe? Or does it just go back and back forever? Typically, naturalists have said that the universe is just eternal and uncaused, and that's all. But there are good reasons, both philosophical and scientific, to doubt that this is the case. Philosophically, the idea of an infinite past is very problematic. Think about it. If the universe never had a beginning, that means that the number of past events in the history of the universe is infinite. But the existence of an actually infinite number of things leads to metaphysical absurdities. To give one example, what is infinity minus infinity? Well, mathematically, you get self-contradictory answers. For example, if you had an infinite number of coins, numbered 1, 2, 3, and so on, to infinity, and I took away all the odd-numbered coins, how many coins would you have left? Well, you'd still have all the even-numbered coins, right? Or an infinity of coins. So infinity minus infinity is infinity. But now suppose instead that I took away all of the coins numbered greater than 3. Now how many coins would you have left? Well, just 3. So infinity minus infinity is 3. And yet in each case, I took away an identical number of coins from an identical number of coins and came up with contradictory results. In fact, you can get any answer when you subtract infinity, from 0 to infinity. And for that reason, inverse operations like subtraction and division are simply prohibited in transfinite arithmetic. But that convention doesn't apply to the real world. You can give away whatever coins you want. This shows, I think, that infinity is just a concept or an idea in your mind, not something that exists in reality. David Hilbert, who was perhaps the greatest mathematician of the 20th century, states, and I quote, "The infinite is nowhere to be found in reality. It neither exists in nature, nor provides a legitimate basis for rational thought. The role that remains for the infinite to play is solely that of an idea." But that entails that since past events are not just ideas in your mind, but are real, the number of past events must be finite. Therefore, the series of past events can't go back and back forever. Rather, the universe must have begun to exist.
So as Dr. Craig points out, within our space-time continuum, there is no such thing as an actual infinite. If there were, you would end up with a lot of absurdities, and he gives some examples of that. So how is that in relation to the question of who created God? Well, what it means is that before today, before right now, there must have been a finite number, a limited number of days. If before today there were an infinite number of days, today could never have arrived. Let's break that down a little bit. Let's say before today, in an eternal universe, there were an infinite number of days. Well, that means you have to traverse an infinite number of days to arrive at today, which is not possible. You can't traverse an infinite. If you go into an infinite series of something, all you ever end up with is more of the same thing. So by definition, if before today there were an infinite number of days, today could never have arrived. And that's the point that Dr. Craig is getting at. And what this means is that there must have been, by definition, by logic, there must have been a first cause, which itself must have been uncaused. Because again, if God himself required a super God of some kind to account for his existence, then we would have to ask who created the super God, who created that, and so forth. So logically, there must have been a finite number of days before today, which points to a first cause, the uncaused first cause, which we know as God. Now, a lot of atheists will concede that the universe, in fact, had a beginning. That's what the science shows. That's what philosophy, as Dr. Craig just explained, shows. But what they don't want to admit to is that this creator of the universe was God. They might say it's something like matter or energy or perhaps another universe. Maybe there's a multiverse out there. Now, we'll explore that in our next video, why the creator of our universe has to, in fact, be God, and why the attributes of that creator only fit God. It doesn't fit anything else. So that'll be our next topic. Hopefully this one answers the question of who created God. We'll have the links to the videos that you watched today in the description. And thanks for watching.